The day my daughter handed my patients back to me like it was an insult, that's the day everything changed. I've been a quiet man my whole life. Not shy, not weak. Quiet. There's a difference, though most people don't figure that out until it's too late. My name is Nathan Huff. I'm 67 years old. I live alone in a clean, modest house on Westbrook Chase Drive in Alpharetta, Georgia. A neighborhood that smells like fresh-cut grass in June and has the kind of stillness that either comforts you or drives you crazy, depending on what you're running from. I'm not running from anything anymore. Hadn't been for years. But some people who should have known better, had mistaken my stillness for surrender. That mistake was about to cost them everything. It was Father's Day, June. Georgia summer already doing what Georgia summer does. Thick air, white sky, heat that sits on your shoulders like a man who overstayed his welcome. I pulled into the driveway of Page and Russell's place on Hembry Road, one of those new construction colonials with the 3-car garage and the landscaping that's just a little too perfect. The kind of house that says we've arrived to everyone driving past. I helped pay for that landscaping. Not that anyone mentioned it anymore. I grabbed the gift bag from the passenger seat, a leather journal for Paige, the good kind, from that little shop on Milton Avenue she used to love, and walked to the front door. Paige opened it before I could knock. Dad. She smiled, but it was the careful kind, the managed kind, the kind she'd been giving me for about 2 years now. Hey, sweetheart. I hugged her. She smelled like the expensive perfume Russell liked, not the one she used to wear. Russell appeared behind her like he'd been staged there. Charcoal linen shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. That smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes. Nathan. He extended his hand. Firm grip. Always too firm, like he was reminding me of something. Russell. I shook it. Same as always. Dinner was set in their formal dining room, the one they used maybe 4 times a year. Crown molding, pendant lights, the whole performance. Paige had made my favorite. I noticed that. I noticed everything. We were 20 minutes in before Russell started. He had a way of doing it, easing into his own importance, like a man lowering himself into a hot bath. Slow, deliberate, savoring every degree. So I don't know if Paige told you, he said, cutting his meat with surgical precision. But we're in the final stages of securing a contract with the Alpharetta Fulton Development Board. She mentioned something, I said. It's significant, Nathan. I mean, he paused like he was being modest, though Russell Boyd had never been modest a day in his life. We're talking about the North Point Corridor project, mixed-use development, 42 acres, the kind of deal that puts you on the map permanently. Paige beamed at him. That beam, the one she used to give me when she made honor roll. Don't go there, Nathan. That's a big contract, I said evenly. How'd you get in front of the board? Something moved behind his eyes. Quick, like a fish darting under still water. Connections, he said smoothly. You spend enough years building relationships in this industry. Doors open. Connections. I picked up my fork, took a bite. Chewed slowly. I knew exactly which door had opened, and whose name was on it. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Hit that like button. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. This story is going to take you somewhere. Here's what I hadn't told anyone yet. 3 weeks earlier, I'd gotten a call from an old colleague, Glenn Tate, a man I'd worked alongside for over 20 years in commercial property consulting before I retired. Glenn called because he'd seen my name on a project prospectus that had crossed his desk. My name, listed as a professional reference and strategic advisor for a company called Boyd Premier Development LLC. I had never agreed to that. I had never even been asked. Glenn, being Glenn, thought I'd simply forgotten to mention it. He called to congratulate me. I thanked him, hung up, and then I sat in my kitchen on Westbrook Chase Drive for about 15 minutes, doing nothing but breathing. He used my name, without asking, without a single conversation. I had spent 34 years building a professional reputation in North Atlanta's commercial real estate consulting world. My word meant something to people on the Fulton County Development Board. It meant something to men like Glenn Tate. That reputation wasn't luck. It was decades of showing up, telling the truth, and never cutting corners. And Russell had folded it up like a napkin and stuffed it in his pocket. I didn't call him. I didn't call Paige. I made a decision quietly, the way I make all my important decisions. And I waited for Father's Day. I reached down beside my chair and pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket. Russell, I said, keeping my voice level, I need to talk to you about something. He looked at the papers. His jaw tightened, just slightly. Paige glanced between us. "What is that?" she asked. "It's a copy of the Boyd Premier Development Prospectus submitted to the Alpharetta Fulton Development Board." I unfolded it slowly, smoothed it on the table, specifically the section listing professional references and strategic advisors. I turned it so Russell could read it. My name is on page 4, paragraph 2. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. "Dad, what—" "I never authorized this," I said, still calm, still even. "Russell never asked me, never mentioned the project. I found out because Glenn Tate called to congratulate me on something I had no idea I was a part of." Russell set down his fork. "Nathan, look, it's more complicated than—" I'm not finished. First time I'd ever said that at this table. I want my name removed from every document, every filing, every version of that prospectus submitted to the board. Today, Monday at the latest. Russell leaned back, did a slow exhale through his nose, that thing he did when he was recalibrating, buying time. Then he looked at Paige, and that's when it shifted. I watched it happen in real time, watched him make the calculation, watched him choose his weapon. "Paige," he said, his voice going soft, injured, "your father is trying to pull my name from the biggest opportunity of our lives, on Father's Day." He let that land. "I don't know what I did to make him hate our success this much, but that is not what's happening," I started. "Russell worked for 2 years on this deal," Paige said, her voice rising. 2 years, Dad, and you're going to walk in here today on Father's Day and blow it up. He used my name without permission, Paige. That's fraud. It's a reference. It is not a reference if I never gave it." She stood up. Oh, here we go. Paige had her mother's eyes when she was angry. Wide. Certain. Terrifying in the way only someone who loves you can be terrifying. "You want to do this?" Her voice was shaking. "Fine. Then here's where we are, Dad. You apologize to Russell right now. You tell him you support this family, or you are no longer welcome in this house, in this family." The room went completely still. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had driven to ballet recitals and stayed up with through fevers and cried over at her college graduation. And I saw something I hadn't let myself see before. She didn't need protecting from Russell. She was standing right next to him. Russell's smirk was small, controlled. The smirk of a man who has just watched someone fold 100 times and expects fold number 101. I stood up slowly, looked Paige in the eye. 5 words. Quiet, clear, final. Watch how fast you fall. I picked up my jacket, walked to the front door, didn't look back. They thought my silence was shame. They thought I was going home to grieve. They had no idea I was going home to make one phone call. I got home at 6:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock above my kitchen sink the moment I walked in. The way you do when something significant has just ended and your brain wants to timestamp it. The evening light was coming through the window at that low golden angle that makes everything in a kitchen look peaceful, whether it is or not. It was not. I set my keys on the counter, sat down at the kitchen table, didn't turn on the television, didn't call anyone. Just sat there in the quiet of my house on Westbrook Chase Drive and let the last 2 hours settle over me like dust after a collapse. 67 years old. I had raised that girl, driven her to school in the dark on winter mornings. Sat outside emergency rooms, missed sleep, missed meals, swallowed my pride on more occasions than I could count, because the alternative, losing her the way I almost lost her after the divorce, was something I couldn't stomach, and she stood across a dinner table and told me I was no longer welcome in her family. With her husband smirking behind her like he'd just won a hand of cards, I sat there for a long time, maybe 40 minutes, maybe more. And somewhere in that stillness, something that had been wound tight inside me for years just released. Not snapped, not exploded. Released. Like a man finally setting down a load he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of his body. I was done holding up the sky. I slept better that night than I had in 3 years. That part still surprises me when I think about it. Most people would have tossed and turned, replaying the dinner, rehearsing arguments, drafting the text they'd never send. Not me. I was out by 9:30 and up at 5:15, the way I always am, coffee on before the sun. Birds outside already doing their thing like nothing had happened. Because for me, nothing needed to happen yet. Sunday passed quietly. I read on the back porch, watered the garden, called my old friend Glenn Tate. Not about the prospectus, just to check in, just to confirm something about his schedule for Monday. Glenn asked if everything was all right. Everything's fine, I told him. Better than fine, actually. He laughed. Nathan Huff, you sound like a man who just made a decision. I did, I said. About 3 years too late. Monday morning, June. The Georgia heat, already climbing by 8 a.m., the kind that makes the asphalt on North Point Parkway shimmer by mid-morning. I dressed the way I used to dress when I was still working. Pressed shirt, good trousers, leather shoes. Not because I was going anywhere, but because some phone calls deserved to be made standing up straight. I had one call to make. Just one. His name was Walter Cobb, 71 years old. Chairman of the Alpharetta Fulton Development Board, and a man I had known since 1991, when we'd both served on a commercial zoning advisory panel for North Fulton County. We'd had lunch maybe twice a year for the better part of 3 decades. He'd attended my retirement dinner, visited when my mother passed. Walter Cobb was the kind of man who had spent 50 years in Georgia development circles and had never once had his integrity questioned, which meant he valued integrity the way some men value money, personally and without apology. I dialed his direct line at 8:45. He picked up on the second ring. Nathan. Warm. Genuine. Don't tell me you're finally coming out of retirement. Not quite, I said. Walter, I need about 10 minutes, and I need you to hear me clearly, because what I'm about to tell you is something I should have said the moment I found out. A pause. When Walter spoke again, the warmth was still there, but underneath it was something else. Attention. The focused, serious kind. Go ahead. I told him everything. Calmly, sequentially. No editorializing, no emotion, no drama. I told him that my name appeared on the Boyd Premier Development Prospectus as a professional reference and strategic advisor. I told him I had never been approached, never consulted, never asked for permission. I told him I had zero professional association with Russell Boyd, zero knowledge of his business practices, and that my name had been used without my consent to gain access to a multi-million-dollar public development contract. Then I said the part that mattered most. Walter, I've known you 30 years. My name means something, or it doesn't, and I will not let it be borrowed by someone I cannot vouch for to open doors I never agreed to open. Silence on the line. Not the uncomfortable kind, the processing kind. Nathan, Walter finally said, and his voice had gone very quiet, very measured, the voice of a man who has just understood the full dimension of something. Are you prepared to put that in writing? I'll have a signed statement to your office by noon. All right. Another pause. I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm not angry, Walter. I just need my name back. We said goodbye. I hung up, stood in my kitchen for a moment. That was it. 10 minutes. 34 years of reputation, and it only took 10 minutes to tell the truth. I typed the signed statement myself, printed it, drove it to the board's administrative office on Windward Parkway, before 11 a.m. The receptionist, a young woman who clearly recognized my name from the document she received, looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Huff, she said, we'll make sure this goes directly to Mr. Cobb. Thank you, I said, and walked out. I want to tell you I spent the rest of Monday feeling triumphant, that I went home and poured something strong and sat on the porch watching the sunset, like a man who just won something. But that's not what happened. I went home and felt the grief of it, because here's the thing nobody tells you about finally stopping, about pulling your hand off the weight you've been holding up for years. The weight doesn't just disappear, it falls, and things underneath it get crushed. And one of those things was the image I'd carried for 22 years of my daughter and me being okay. Of us making it through the divorce, through her teenage years, through everything, and coming out the other side with something real between us. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about the 7-year-old girl who used to fall asleep in the car on the way back from my place, and how I'd carry her inside so she wouldn't wake up. She was so small then. I gave myself Monday evening to feel that. All of it. No shortcuts. Tuesday, I got up and moved on. What happened next, I didn't engineer. I want to be clear about that. I made one phone call, one statement. I didn't contact Russell's competitors, didn't call his associates or clients, didn't post anything or tell anyone who didn't directly need to know. I just told the truth to one man who had the authority to act on it, and the dominoes fell on their own. By Tuesday afternoon, I learned through Glenn, who had his own sources inside the development community, that the Alpharetta Fulton Development Board had suspended the North Point Corridor contract review, pending a full audit of the Boyd Premier Development Prospectus. Legal had been looped in. The board's ethics protocol had been triggered automatically the moment fraudulent references were identified in a public contract submission. They didn't just pull the deal. They flagged the file, which meant Russell Boyd's name was now attached to a documented case of fraudulent professional misrepresentation on a public development project in Fulton County, Georgia. And in the commercial real estate development world, particularly in a market like North Atlanta, where everybody knows everybody and reputation is the actual currency, that flag didn't stay quiet. It traveled, fast, the way bad news always does in small professional circles. By Tuesday evening, 2 other firms Russell had been in preliminary conversations with had gone silent. No calls returned, no emails answered. The professional equivalent of a door being shut very politely in your face. Glenn called me Tuesday night. "Nathan, I don't know exactly what you said to Walter, but I just told him the truth." Well, Glenn exhaled slowly. The truth apparently had somewhere to be. Wednesday morning, my phone started ringing. The first call came at 7:52 a.m. Russell. I looked at the screen. Let it ring. Let it go to voicemail. Not yet. He called again at 8:14, then 8:40, then sent a text that read, "Nathan, we need to talk. This has gotten way out of hand, and I think there's been a misunderstanding. Please call me back." Misunderstanding. Interesting word for a man who typed my name into a legal document without my knowledge. I didn't respond. At 9:30, Paige called. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment. My daughter, my little girl, the one who told me I wasn't welcome in her family 3 days ago. I let it ring. I needed her to arrive at understanding on her own, not because I'd answered and walked her there. That's the thing about truth. If you deliver it, people can reject the delivery. But if they find it themselves, if they stumble into it in their own living room, at 9 in the morning, while their husband is making his 14th panicked phone call, and the walls are coming down around them, it sticks differently. It sticks to the bone. What I found out later from Paige herself in a conversation that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life was what happened inside that house on Hembry Road on Wednesday morning. Russell had come home Tuesday night already cracking. The professional silence from his contacts had unnerved him in a way Paige had never seen before. He'd been on the phone until midnight. By Wednesday morning, he'd received formal written notification from the board. The deal was dead. The flag was real, and 2 industry contacts had quietly, professionally made it clear they wouldn't be moving forward with any pending conversations. And that's when Russell stopped performing. The charm went first, then the composure. Then whatever careful architecture he'd built around himself in that house came apart at the seams. And what was underneath wasn't the ambitious, image-conscious man Paige had married. It was someone ugly, someone desperate, and pointed, and mean. He turned on her the way cornered people turn on whoever is closest, blamed her father, blamed her, said things, and I won't repeat all of them because they're not mine to repeat, that made it clear in the starkest possible terms exactly what Paige had been to Russell Boyd. A door, that's all. A door with my name on it. And when the door stopped being useful, he didn't even try to hide it. By Wednesday afternoon, Paige was sitting alone in the house on Hembry Road, her husband having driven off somewhere in a fury, her phone in her hand, looking at my number. 3 days after Father's Day, exactly like I said. She thought my silence was punishment. It wasn't. It was the first time in 22 years I'd let her face something without me standing between her and the fall, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't cost me. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. There is a specific kind of knock on your door that you feel before you hear it. Not loud, not angry, desperate. I was in the backyard when it happened. Wednesday afternoon, just past 3 o'clock. I'd been pulling weeds from the garden bed along the back fence, the kind of slow, mindless work that keeps your hands busy while your mind does what it needs to do. The Georgia heat had softened slightly, that brief, merciful window between afternoon and evening, when the air almost feels forgiving. My phone had been face down on the patio table since noon. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't available. There's a difference, though. Most people confuse the two. I heard the knock from the backyard. 3 times. Careful, almost apologetic. I knew who it was before I reached the door. I pulled off my garden gloves, walked through the house slowly, looked through the sidelight window beside the front door. Paige. She was standing on my porch on Westbrook Chase Drive, in a wrinkled linen blouse. The pale yellow one she'd had for years, the one she wore when she wasn't trying to impress anyone. Her hair wasn't done. No makeup. red around the eyes in a way that told me she hadn't just cried recently. She'd been crying for hours. 29 years old, and she looked like she was 7 again. Standing outside my apartment door the first weekend after the divorce, backpack on, stuffed rabbit under her arm, trying to be brave. I opened the door. She looked at me. Her chin trembled once, then she locked it down. Dad. Her voice was barely holding together. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd made the decision, where I'd sat in the stillness of Sunday evening and felt everything rearrange inside me. I put the kettle on without asking. Paige always drank tea when something was wrong. Had since she was 12. She didn't speak right away, just sat there with her hands folded on the table, staring at them like they belonged to someone else. I set the mug in front of her, sat down across from her, and waited. He's not, she started. Stopped. Russell is not who I... She pressed her lips together. I don't know how to say this. Take your time. He screamed at me, Dad. Her eyes came up, raw, unguarded. Not raised his voice, screamed. Like I was nothing. Like I was the reason everything fell apart. She laughed, but it had no humor in it. Like I was supposed to apologize because his fraud got discovered. I kept my face steady. Don't rush this. Let her land. He said... She paused and something moved across her face. Shame, I think, mixed with the particular horror of a truth arriving too late. He said the only reason he ever needed me involved was because of your name, your connections. That without your reputation attached to his pitch, the board would have never taken the meeting. She looked at me. He said it like it was my fault for not delivering you properly. The kitchen was very quiet, delivered me, like I was a package. Like 34 years of professional integrity was a tool someone could borrow without asking, and return slightly damaged. Paige, you tried to tell me. Her voice cracked on the last word. At dinner, you weren't attacking him. You were just telling the truth, and She stopped, pressed her fingers to her mouth for a moment. I gave you an ultimatum, Dad. On Father's Day, I stood in my own dining room and told you that you weren't welcome in my family anymore, and you just stood up, and... I said 5 words and left. Yeah, she exhaled shakily. Yeah, you did. She wrapped both hands around the mug, stared into it. I've been doing that to you my whole life, haven't I? She said quietly. Every time things got uncomfortable, every time I didn't want to hear something, I made you choose between the truth and losing me. And you always chose me. She looked up. And I called that love, but it wasn't fair. It was never fair. There it is, the thing I'd been waiting years to hear. Not because I needed the validation, I'd stopped needing that somewhere around age 60, but because she needed to say it, for herself. No, I said carefully, it wasn't fair. She blinked. I think she expected something softer. I love you, I continued. I have loved you every single day of your life, including Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and today. That has never been in question. I leaned forward slightly. But I made a mistake for a long time, Paige. Every time you threatened to walk away, I folded. I thought I was protecting you. What I was actually doing was teaching you that my boundaries didn't matter. That if you pushed hard enough, I'd move. She was very still. Russell learned that lesson too, I said, probably from watching us. That landed. I saw it land. She didn't flinch away from it, which told me she'd already been sitting with some version of that thought before she knocked on my door. So what do I do? She asked. And her voice was small in a way that had nothing to do with weakness. It was the smallness of someone who has just had the architecture of their life cracked down the middle and is sitting in the rubble asking a genuine question. That's not mine to answer, I said. That's yours. My phone buzzed on the counter. We both looked at it. Russell Boyd. Paige's jaw tightened. He's been calling you all day. I know. Are you going to answer? I looked at the screen until it stopped buzzing. No. She almost smiled. Almost. 3 minutes later, a voicemail notification appeared. I didn't move to play it, but Paige looked at the phone and said very quietly, He called me 40 times between last night and this morning. The last one, he wasn't asking me anything anymore. He was just talking, telling me how much he'd sacrificed, how everyone was against him, how I owed him loyalty. She shook her head slowly. I'd heard him sell himself before. Never watched him beg. It's very different. People show you who they are, I said, when the performance gets too expensive to maintain. She looked at me across the table. My daughter, 29 years old. sitting in the same chair she used to sit in as a teenager when she'd come over for weekends, and we'd eat cereal for dinner and watch old movies because neither of us felt like trying too hard. I'm sorry, Dad. Not performed, not managed, just real, plain. The way an apology sounds when it actually costs something. I'm so sorry for what I said at dinner and for everything before it. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. I know. We stayed like that for a moment. Then I stood up and refilled the kettle. Russell called twice more that evening. The second time, he left a voicemail that was 3 minutes and 40 seconds long. I know because I eventually played it. Once, alone, after Paige had gone. He started with justifications, moved through explanations, arrived somewhere in the middle at something that resembled an apology, though it was the kind of apology that's really just a well-dressed request. He needed me to call Walter Cobb, needed me to clarify the situation, needed me to explain that there'd been a miscommunication, and that Russell Boyd was a man of integrity who'd simply moved too fast in his eagerness. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. A man of integrity. From a voicemail left by someone who forged professional references on a public contract submission. I deleted it. I've thought a lot about what mercy looks like at 67. When you're young, you think mercy is softness. You think forgiveness means reopening every door you closed. You think love means absorbing whatever someone throws at you and coming back smiling. I don't think that anymore. Paige came back 2 days later. We talked again, longer this time, harder in some places. She'd spoken to an attorney. She was asking the right questions, making the hard decisions, and she was doing it without asking me to carry it for her. That was the thing that told me she was going to be all right. I told her she could call me, any time, for anything real. What I didn't tell her, what I didn't need to say out loud, was that the door she thought she'd closed on Father's Day had never actually locked. Because I'm her father, that part doesn't negotiate. But the version of me that folded every time she pushed, that man retired on a Sunday evening in June, somewhere between the dinner and the drive home. Russell Boyd called one final time on Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, I looked at the screen, sent it to voicemail, made my eggs, watched the birds in the backyard, read the paper. Some men beg loudly, I thought, because they spent their whole lives mistaking silence for weakness. They never understand, right up until the end, that the quiet ones are the ones who knew exactly what they were holding the entire time. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.